Hey, okay, all right, we did cluster analysis and LPA this week. So the goal of both of these is to group basically data into sets of different things to determine similarity and dissimilarity between different groups. So I've already attached my data and installed all the packages just for ease of this. So to start out, you just want to standardize your data. You want to remove any missing data. Depends on how big your data set is. Obviously, I made mine, so I don't have that. So I'm just going to do this real quick. So I'm making a new function over here, function into your new factor. And then I chose to use, so I did k-means. So in order to use k-means, you want to have an assumed number of clusters. So one way to do this is via the ALPA method. There are a couple different methods, but I chose this one because it was easy and it worked. And basically, you're trying to look at, once again, that the homogeneity and heterogeneity of groups to evaluate the variability. And then you're using the total within cluster sum of squares to calculate this. So this is part of the k-means process. So make k-means within sum of squares with this function to create a cluster, and then running this, you want to set the maximum number for your cluster. I purposely made mine so I know that there wasn't going to be more than 10. A lot of people picked 20 as a maximum cluster. And then you want to run your algorithm over the range, so setting range 2 to 20, because I want to have more than one cluster to see these differences, and this is all going to be important for actually viewing and plotting the clusters. So then I also created a data frame with the results from these, so for everything from above, so you could see the plot. So I'm putting all this information down below in order to see how. Okay, so just like in a scree plot, every time I've run this, it's been different. I don't know why it's pulling my data like this, but I ended up using 6. Usually the line comes straight across. So this is what you use to pick the number of clusters that your data set will have. It's usually where it starts going flat. So here it's looking like I could have picked 7, but I'm still going with 6 just because I've used it in the first few times that I've ran this. So using those clusters, you're going to look at the different centers, the sums, number of observations in each cluster, etc. So you want to run, use the k-means function, pull from your data set, and identify the number of clusters that you have and make a factor. I'm going to run this, and we can get all of the information about the different clusters. So number of people in each cluster, the different means within each cluster, so across for each one, so my 6, the different vectors, each sum of squares, and then the other components that you could run. So if you did cluster $, all of these to specifically get the information. So I'm going to next plot the cluster. I use the fviz cluster function. It's plugged in my cluster, my data. The ellipses type, there's a couple different options. Convex was suggested by mine. I ran it a few times and had some issues and looked it up, and the convex was the ellipse that they wanted to use, and just a minimal theme. So these are my 6 clusters. Once again, this looks different than it has. Every time I ran it since yesterday, it's looked a little bit different, but we can see over here on the legend which each cluster is, so the different colors and different shapes, the people within the data set, the different centers, all of that information just visualized. So if you want to evaluate each individual cluster, you can just look at the attributes as a whole. So running that, and then you can run to find the information about those each cluster, the centers, and the size. So just like we saw up above, just to get more information about the different components. And because when you do this, you want clusters to be separated. You want the centers, the differences between the groups to be significant. So you want to look at like the centroid information, the distances between them, the similarity coefficients. So you don't, the farther apart they are, the better it is at determining, oh, this person is more likely to be, like what the groups kind of are signifying and where someone is going to fall. Because once again, you're trying to assume that these different groups all share something in common, and you want to be able to easily see which data points will likely fall in each group. So you can see all this information. The rows are the clusters, columns are variables. On average, the values for each cluster are in the particular columns. And then we can move on and we can specifically look at the centers. I just created a new function for this. We've seen it above, but specifically these are the things that I wanted to look at to determine how many people are in them, where their centroid is, so the center here. And you can see this across the different groups. Oh, didn't even tell you what I was looking at. My data used different age groups, tenure within the organization, and then levels of commitment, just to see if there's a difference between your age, tenure, and commitment in general, and what you could be predicted upon based on how long you'd been within the company. So next we're going to build a data frame, and we're going to reshape the data set. There's a couple ways to validate the information for cluster analysis. I've already libraryed this function. And you want to create a data set with your cluster numbers again, so you're going to use that from the elbow above. So signifying 1 to 6 clusters on cluster. And then you're trying to look at your different centers. You're going to use this below too. So reshaping the data, so name this reshape, plugging in the things from above, looking from commitment to tenure across. This is going to compress my data, so it looks a little bit different. You can pick the reorganizing the clusters, and then you'll see the different features. So as opposed to going across the top, now it's in a different direction. So to validate the clusters, you can use, once again, a number of different things, but I already installed both of these. One for cluster validation, and then determining number of clusters in a data set. Both of these I've installed. So to start, we're going to evaluate the internal quality of the clusters, so we can see how how particular groups are divided across clusters. So we can create a table. I picked age for this, just picking one of my variables against my cluster data, and then the other two above from my actual cluster information. And this way you can see how people are split up across the clusters. So this is age. We had 3 groups of age, and then our 6 clusters at the top. So age, I'd had like 18 to 25, and then it was 26 to 34, 35, and above. So you can see that how many people fall into each cluster. So those who are young only fall into cluster 3, 4, and 6. So you could look at these specific people outside of those clusters and see where they fell, and how this kind of worked against our other variables. But you can do this for each variable to see kind of the distributions of people within them. So these smaller ones obviously are the ones that you would like to look at. Most of the people fell in clusters 1 and 2 here in this age group, but there's one over here, and same with the 3, 2, 3. The smaller numbers could be interesting to look at. If you want to run just the general statistics for the k-means, you also can do that. So looking at the cluster statistics using like utility and distance, and just to get more information for the clusters, and then just running this in general, so you'll be able to see a lot of information. I'm going to pull a few from these that I wanted to look at specifically, but this is going to be important for the internal validation, and then there's some more stuff for external validation after. So you get a ton of information. So you get the number of people in your entire data set, your cluster number, your different cluster sizes, and this can obviously save a lot of time up at the top. If you want to just jump into it, it could be a lot faster, but I wanted to break down specifically the different parts I looked at. So how big the clusters are, the distance between them, the median distance between them, how far they're separated, etc. Between information, within information, taking that sum squares information. The silhouette is another method. I used k-means, but to look at how wide the different silhouettes are in order to determine like the differences between the different groups, and then a couple different things here. So we're going to look specifically at the Dunn index for this part. So the higher Dunn index indicates that you have better clusters, so that means that the clusters are like kind of more compact, and they're just generally well separated from the other ones. So we can see this number here. I'm touching my screen right here. It's going to run the same thing. Looking at that specifically, so obviously not great, as we can see. A couple of mine touch. It was better. I'm not sure what happened with my data, but you want more of them to look separate from the others like this, looking at the difference between them, not to be as close. Like here, something is going on in these ones that are a lot closer for the clusters. And then you can also use external validation to assess the similarity of clusters, so you can see how close clustering is to like a different set of data. So cluster stats for the variables within the data sets can be calculated. I did age again. And then you can use this information with the predetermined other data that you can pull from R to look at the different things. I picked the RAND index and Malia's VI, so variability index. So for the RAND index, it's looking at how similar the clusters are. So you use an algorithm and you assess the similarity between two clusters. And it's adjusted for chance. So it's going to be a -1 to 1 value, and then so -1 is absolutely no agreement, and then 1 is perfect agreement. And then you're looking at the pairwise comparisons between the clusters, and that's specified by the random model that we signified up here. And then you look at the number and size of the clusters, also assumed to be fixed, and then random clusters are generated to shuffle all the elements and see if there is actual differences. So my value is 0.5, which isn't bad. It's not in the negatives, where there'd be none, so it is higher. So the similarity is not great, but we knew that from you can even just visualize that here. And then Malia's VI is another one. It's comparing specifically the two clusters of the data set, and it provides variation information, or what you kind of lose and gain in between different clusters. So this value is also a 0.9, which is not great. If I would have fixed my data, you'd see both of these a little bit better. But we're going to move on to LPA. Also very similar in order to look at trying to look at like the different groups between observed data. You're just once again like reducing the data into different subgroups. So I've already installed all the packages. I'm going to library them. So for this, you're going to create a model similar to before, and you're going to take out omit missing data and standardize the data as well. So you can do that all here. I don't have any missing data. And then I am just using, since I was looking at tenure and commitment, I just used company enjoyment as my general outcome space to see if you could find groups that were more likely to enjoy something. So we're using Bayesian information criteria to find the best fit. It's a log likelihood method, and you use a number of parameters and your sample size to calculate this. Sometimes it's going to take a while. Okay, not bad. And then I'm going to plot what was created for this model. So use this information to find, you can run the summary as well. You can use both the summary and this plot to find the Bayesian information criteria that best fits your data. So you're looking at clusters, volume, the shape, the orientation, and the distribution to see which is the best fit for your data. So down here, you can look at the different values to see how many. Oh, I need to change this. Sorry. You can see which are the best fits. VEV is my highest. So you can see over here this red X is my highest values. VEV and 3 are my highest here. Just looking at my BIC. So you would change this to 3. VEV. It was different yesterday. So we might as well run it with this. So in order to get more information on this model, we're going to make a new factor, use the mclust function, the clustering from above, VEV from the information, and what the Bayesian. And then you can run a summary, and this will describe those kind of characteristics and how things are classified within each cluster. You go to clustering table below. So this one is going to use so 3 clusters in total. And so we will know that the VEP is going to have ellipses, and the shapes are going to be pretty similar within the 3 different components. You can look at the log likelihood, the number, and different degrees of freedom, the BIC we've seen above. So next we're going to reshape the data. This probably will not work. It was working yesterday, and then my R quit and kept saying it was corrupt. So I will try to run this, and we'll see if it works. Hopefully it does, but I had some issues yesterday. But basically you want to try, similar to how we were validating before, you want to take the means from all the different clusters and put them into a new model. So you specify your data frame, your model that you've created above, your different parameters. You want to look at the means of the different clusters, change the names, melt these down into the different variables, and then you'd be able to see, let's see if it works. Okay, this was running yesterday. I had issues with the bottom, but basically you would see a graph, or this is the finally, this is the plot. because I couldn't create this, you can't see this here, but basically you could see different lines on the graph that would show the different groups, and you could be able to see differences between the groups to make kind of conclusions. Or you might see some people just had a box with a dot in the middle. You're trying to see the differences. Since there was none, then you wouldn't be able to. But basically, you're using this model to see the different means. And if there were significant differences, you'd see different lines and separation between them. Okay, so you're basically using all this information to look at different opinions and demographics and various information to look at how people within a larger data set can be broken down into subgroups. All right, bye.